Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca, and it is finally time for me to make some clay Christmas ornaments again. If you don't know, this is something I used to do around Christmas time, but apparently it's been like 4 years since the last time I did this. How has so much time passed? I feel like I did this video not that long ago. But to be fair, the last 2 years have been a bit hectic with me getting married, moving multiple times, and now being pregnant. Anyways, in my previous clay ornament videos, I only used polymer clay, which needs to be baked in an oven. However, this time I'll be working with air dry clay as well. Now, before jumping into making ornaments, I needed a better idea of what colors I had to work with. My plan is to use these Arrtx Acrylic Paint markers to paint the clay. I do want to thank Arrtx for sending these to me and for sponsoring today's video. And I do also want to say that all thoughts and opinions are my own. These markers have a nylon brush tip and require very little prep work, which I really like. Since you do not need to pump them, you just need to shake them. The advanced liquid ink system allows for uniform ink flow and control for smooth drawing. There are 36 colors in this set. I do really like that each color is assigned a number. It makes keeping a swatch chart much simpler. I was very happy with the color selection, and all the colors are very vibrant. I was looking forward to seeing how they will work on the clay. Speaking of clay, I wanted to do a bit of experimenting with the air dry clay. The clay I am using is Sago Brothers air dry clay. I've used this clay for projects in the past, and it is one that my younger sister used a lot. But I don't know how it compares to other air dry clays since my experience is very limited. So this clay might be very good or it might be kind of horrible. I don't really know. Something I wanted to test was if I could cut shapes out of the clay. One of my favorite ornaments is one I made of Marshall from Animal Crossing, and to make it, I cut the shape out of the clay. I call this the cookie cutter method. Sadly, the air dry clay doesn't really seem like it'll work with this method. So for my cookie cutter method ornaments, I'll use polymer clay like I usually do. So I did learn something from this, but now I had all of this clay that I didn't want to waste. I also didn't want to put it back in the bag because from past experience, this clay can grow mold kind of easily. So I decided that I would turn this clay into a ball, and then that ball would become a Junimo from Stardew Valley. I've been playing a lot of Stardew Valley recently. Ever since the newest update came out, I started a new farm and it's been a lot of fun. Plus, someone requested that I draw Junimo in my last live stream, so they were kind of on my mind. Junimo have very skinny arms and legs that seemed like they would be too fragile if I made them out of clay. So I took a Christmas hook and painted it black to use for the arms. Also, when cutting wire, make sure to hold onto the other end so that the piece that you cut doesn't go flying across the room. I learned that one the hard way. Anyways, I bent the little wire pieces and stuck them into the clay. Now it has little arms and it's so cute. I waited a couple of days for the clay to dry and now it was ready for paint. Junimos come in many colors, but the color I usually think of first is the green one, so I am making it green. Overall, the color was going on well, however I could tell that the air dry clay was absorbing the paint a bit, so I knew I would need to do 2 coats at least. I really like how fast the paint was able to dry. It dries very quickly, so I was able to keep rotating the clay and painting the different parts without having to wait too long for the paint to dry. After the 2 coats were applied, I could now add the face. For the eyes, I brought out one of my fine-tipped paint markers so that I could be a little bit more precise. Thankfully, Junimo have very simple faces. Next was adding a blush. I used kind of the hot pink color for this, and I feel like it looks really cute. We are almost done. I needed to add the eye pin so I can add a hook to hang the ornament from the tree. I coated the pin in Mod Podge as a form of glue because apparently I don't have any glue in the house. And lastly, I repeated what I did for the arms for the legs. I was kind of debating on adding the legs, but I'm really glad I did. For some reason, it just makes it extra cute. And so here is my clay Junimo. It's simple, but I feel like it was a good warm-up to get me used to working with the materials. The next ornament I'm going to make will be made out of polymer clay using my so-called cookie cutter method. When I was looking at the colors I had for the markers, I saw this blue and it reminded me of Chao from Sonic the Hedgehog. If you don't know, I really love Chao and they are kind of hard to find merch for, so I'm going to make my own. I sketched out this Chao digitally and I decided to make it hold a little heart just to give it something to do with its arms. Also, since the feet and wings are going to be separate pieces, I fully drew them separately. Once my sketch was done, I printed out and cut out the different pieces. I'm doing this because I want to use the paper as a template for cutting out the shape in the clay. For my clay, I am using Sculpt Original Oven Baked Clay. Now, to be honest, I have had this clay for years and I was a bit worried that it wasn't going to work anymore. It was very hard and crumbly at first, but after a good amount of kneading the clay, it became much more soft and workable, so I could roll it out into a flat shape. When rolling the clay out, I put pens on each side to help me keep my clay the same thickness on all sides. However, I felt like the pens were a little too thick, so I switched to pencils. The pencils help me apply equal pressure to both sides, so we don't get one side that is really thin and one side that is really thick. Now I place my paper cutout on the clay, and I use one of my clay tools to cut the shape out of the clay. Back in the day when I did this with Marshall, the result was kind of messy when I removed the paper, so I was kind of scared to see what the clay was going to look like once I was done cutting out the shape. But thankfully this time the shape was decently clean, but I did go around and try to touch up the edges a bit. Oh, also, I forgot to mention that I taped down a piece of glass from a picture frame onto my desk so that I would have a smooth and clean workspace for the clay, and this was working very well. However, the clay also really likes to stick to the glass. I wasn't able to take the clay off without feeling like I would ruin the shape. I tried a couple different things to unstick the clay, and thankfully with this tool I was able to get it unstuck enough for me to grab. I was really worried I wouldn't be able to get the clay off the glass without ruining it. I repeated the same process for the wings. For the floaty circle and the feet, I just made the shape of them myself instead of cutting out the shape. I wanted them to have a more rounded and soft feel. Now that I have all the pieces, I can get them ready to bake. Before putting them in the oven, I put an eye pin covered in liquid Sculpey through the floaty circle and into the Chao. I'm hoping this will hold. I am a little nervous because the eye pin isn't very long, but if it doesn't hold, that's a problem for future Becca. So I baked the clay in the oven. This part always makes me nervous, but everything turned out good and was now ready for paint. Before jumping into the actual painting, I did some swatches on the back of the clay to see how well the paint adhered to the clay. And it wasn't bad, but I felt like it could be better. So to help the paint, I am adding some layers of gesso onto the clay. Gesso is a paint-like substance that you can paint onto surfaces to make them more suitable for paint. It gives the surface a bit of texture so that the paint can stick better, and the gesso definitely helped in this case. Before, when I was applying the paint, it felt like it was kind of just sitting on top of the clay, but this feels like it has something to hold onto, and this results in better coverage. So I did a couple coats of gesso on the front and sides of the clay. Also, my heat gun was very helpful while doing this because I'm impatient. Before painting, we have one more step. Now I could freehand the details of the Chao onto the clay, but I felt like I would get a better result if I used transfer paper. So I taped the transfer paper to my drawing and taped that onto the clay. Transfer paper is coated with graphite on one side, so if you apply pressure with a pencil, you can transfer the graphite onto another surface. The result was kind of faint, but I was definitely able to work with it since it gave me a good idea of where things go, and I was able to darken it a bit with my pencil. And now it is finally time for paint. Yay! I'm starting by painting in all of the yellow areas. At first I was using the lightest yellow I had, but that felt a bit too light, so I switched to a slightly more vibrant one. One of the reasons I am using these markers for my ornaments is that they are waterproof. Arrtx says that the high chroma paint has high coverage, is waterproof, and wear resistant, so I felt like they were the right choice for making this project. And I do have to say, I am very happy with the coverage of these markers. I remember when brush-tipped paint markers were first coming out, one of the main complaints was that they were not as opaque as the standard bullet-nibbed markers. However, these have very good coverage. Even the colors that are usually more translucent, like yellow and red, still have very good coverage in my experience. Also, a bit off topic, but is anyone else excited for the third Sonic the Hedgehog movie? I'm personally pretty hyped for it. Shadow looks so cool. Shadow has always been one of my favorite Sonic characters, so I'm really excited to see him in the movie. I am also a bit scared or nervous for the movie. I feel like sometimes the parts of the movies that focus more on the humans get really chaotic or kind of weird sometimes. But I know I'll probably enjoy most of the movie. Another side tangent, but I do really want Sega to bring back the Chao Garden. The Chao Garden was in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, and they were my favorite parts of those games. Like, come on, Sega, just let me take care of cute little Chao again. I love them so much. Like, I don't know why they won't include them in the games. Oh, also, I was so nervous when adding the details to the face of the black marker. Thankfully, I was able to stay steady and didn't majorly mess up. However, I was going to touch up some of the yellow on the feet, and I was holding the marker in a funny way while I picked up one of the tiny feet and did this. This guy's so good! I can fix it. Thankfully, like I said, these markers have very good coverage, so I was able to fix my mistake really easily. Yay! Oh, and I added little blushies to the face because I thought it'd be cute. Chao don't really usually have these, I just wanted to add them. To help seal in the paint, I'm going to cover it with some Mod Podge. Even though the markers are already wear resistant, I wanted to add this just to be safe. I also used the Mod Podge to stick on the feet and the wings. And ta-da! My Chao is now done. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I did stylize the Chao a bit differently to kind of make it my own, but I feel like it's still really cute and looks like a Chao. For the next ornament, it's going to be made out of air dry clay, and it's actually a surprise for my youngest brother. So I was at my parents' house and we were hanging up Christmas ornaments. While we were decorating, my youngest brother found the old Among Us ornament that I made for my sister, and he got so excited and insisted that he got to hang that one up on the tree. I honestly didn't really know that he knew what Among Us was, but it was so cute seeing him get so excited by the ornament. So I decided that I'd make him an Among Us character of his own. Thankfully, they do have a very simple design, so sculpting the shape wasn't too tricky. I waited a few days for the clay to dry and I could start painting. For the area around the face, I chose dark blue. In the past, I used black, but I felt like that would be a little too harsh this time, so I used dark blue instead. For the color of the crewmate, I chose red since I feel like the red crewmate is kind of the main one you see a lot. As I was adding the paint, I noticed that the backpack thing wasn't attached to the body very well. I was actually able to really easily pull it off. Something that is tricky about air dry clay is that it shrinks as it dries since the water in it evaporates. In this case, the back and body shrunk away from each other, so they ended up not being very attached anymore. But this is okay, it made both pieces a bit easier to paint, and I can just glue the pieces back together. Or, use Mod Podge since I don't have glue. One thing I am a big fan of when it comes to using paint markers on clay is that I get a very smooth finish. In the past, whenever I would try to use paint to color my clay projects, I would end up with a lot of texture, or you could see my paint strokes a lot. However, with the paint pens, the paint goes down really smoothly and I get a very flat finish that I'm a big fan of. It just looks so smooth and satisfying. Because I am giving this to my youngest brother, I decided to coat this ornament in a couple layers of Mod Podge, just to add a bit of extra protection for the paint. I actually really like the look that the Mod Podge adds. I may need to add some to my Junimo. So here is my Among Us crewmate for my little brother. It's not perfect, but I hope he likes it when I give it to him. So for this last ornament, I knew I wanted to make one of my original characters as an ornament. However, I needed to pick a character that fit the colors that I had. After looking at all the colors for a while, I decided on Samson. If you don't know, Samson is an OC I made for the visual novel game I made a couple of years ago. You can actually still play the game on itch, as well as my website. I wouldn't consider Samson one of my main OCs like Doris and her friends or Pariah and her friends. However, he is one of my favorite OCs, mostly because I find him very fun to draw, and I also really like his color palette. Also in this sketch, I sketched him in his normal outfit, but I end up drawing a winter outfit onto him to make him more Christmassy. Just like how I did with the Chao, I printed out my sketch, cut out the shape, rolled out the clay, cut the shape out of the clay, baked it, coated it with gesso, and used transfer paper to transfer some of the details. Now, somehow Samson's face ended up being a little longer on the left. I also accidentally transferred the sketch a little bit tilted. However, I felt like I could still make things work. For the rest of the details, I sketched them in myself since they weren't too complicated. Also, I pressed really hard this time when I was transferring my sketch, and it ended up pretty dark. I tried to lighten the graphite with my kneaded eraser, but it was really stuck into the gesso. Anyways, now it was time for paint. I decided to start with the skin. I felt like it would be the most time consuming since I have to paint around the details of the face. Also, I have a random question for people that know stuff about clay. After I baked my clay, some of my pieces had what looked like air bubbles in them. The bubbles were not there before baking, but appeared after baking. They weren't super noticeable, but I was wondering if there was a way for me to avoid these air bubbles from appearing. It's a problem I've kind of had in the past, and I never know what to do about it. So any info would be very helpful. For the ears, I used a slightly darker color to help push them back a bit and also separate them from the face. For the hair, I started by using a darker blue to outline the hair, and then I'll go in with a lighter blue to fill in the hair and make the lines thinner. At first I was going for more of a lineless look with this paint job. However, this will end up changing later on. It is crazy that we are almost at the end of the year. I feel like this year has flown by, but at the same time it feels like so much has happened and that it's been a very long year. Like, I'm currently 18 weeks pregnant and a part of me is like, wow, I'm already 18 weeks. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm only 18 weeks. I feel like it's because the morning sickness phase feels like it lasts for so long. And my morning sickness kind of lasted all the way till like 14 or 15 weeks. It kind of started to let up around week 12 and 13. But yeah, it was really tough. Thankfully, now that I'm a bit further into the second trimester, I am feeling much better than I was. Next week, we get to maybe find out the gender of the baby, and I'm super excited. I'm not sure when we'll be telling all of you the gender, but it'll be after we tell all of our family. We are kind of planning to keep it as a surprise for a little bit. Anyways, enough baby talk, let's get back to the art. I do have a tip if you plan to use these markers. I recommend storing them with the tip facing down. I always find that the markers are much more juicy and the paint flows better if I've been storing them with the tip downwards compared to horizontal or upwards. Another tip is to make sure that the tips and barrels are fully tightened. For some reason, some of mine were a little bit loose or would become loose, and I would need to tighten them again. Also, a little side note, I'm really happy with how my mug design turned out. I finally got the samples for my merch and I'm really happy with how everything turned out. I'll have a link to my store in the description if you're interested in checking them out. Anyways, back to the markers. I do have to say that these markers were perfect for making the clay ornaments. The colors were vibrant and had good coverage, and they laid down very smooth. I felt like I could cover bigger areas but also color small details because of the brush nibs. They were perfect for this project and I highly recommend them if you're looking for paint markers. If you want to check them out for yourself, I'll have links in the description. So as you can see, I'm finally working on the face. I was kind of putting it off because I was nervous to work on it. Thankfully, I feel like it turned out okay. I was kind of able to adjust things with the paint so that they look a bit more centered and a little less tilted. It's not perfect, but I'll take it. When it comes to DIY projects like these, the perfectionist in me wants things to be perfect, almost like a factory made it. But these aren't made by a factory, they are handmade by me, so I try not to get too caught up in making things perfect and accept the imperfections. I just tell myself that it adds more character. After I added the line art to the face details, I felt like I needed to add line art to other areas. Previously, I had added a little bit to some of the clothes because I didn't have any darker colors to separate the different parts. But I was still going for a kind of lineless look, so I didn't fully commit to the line art. But I felt like it would help the art feel more finished if I added the line art to all of the different areas. And I'm really happy I did. I do feel like it brought everything together and kind of tightened things up. The last step was to add some Mod Podge, and now it is done. I honestly love this ornament so much. This is the first time I've made one of my characters as a Christmas ornament, so it feels very unique and special. Because of editing, it probably seems like I got these all done pretty quickly, but I had like 7 hours of footage and I didn't even record everything. So these took a lot of time, but I had a bunch of fun, and my clay ornaments always end up being really special to me. And making this video was also just a really fun change of pace. Thank you so much to Arrtx for sending me these markers to use. Like I said, you can check them out using the link in the description. Also, a super big thank you to my wonderful YouTube members and Patreon patrons. Your support means so much to me. And of course, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!